second round. Okay. Professor Msila says there's a second round coming, which means that I must be short in my answers, otherwise there won't be time. Muzi, with regard to your request about the board, agreed. They contact me, I'm happy to serve on the board. On the matter of how the university is treating with the issue of the important issue of people with disability, fortunately, Vice Chancellor is sitting next to me there. She must answer that question. It's an important question, I agree. It needs her to answer it. When we were in government, we thought this was one of the matters which needed really close attention. We had resisted the idea of the formation of a ministry dealing with women, youth, people with disability. And the reason we're resisting the idea of a ministry, we're saying that those issues belong to the President of the Republic, not particular ministers. So right at the top, because it's a cross-cutting issue, it must impact on every element of government. So you can't allocate it to a ministry. That's the position we took. And as a result, the government had, I don't know what the situation is now, government had a very comprehensive policy on how to deal with the disability issue. So that indeed, even I remember that the World Bank poached one of our senior officials to deal with the disability issue in Washington. So I'm sure there was a setting within which our universities could deal with the matter of disability. What UNISA is doing particularly about this matter, I really don't know. But the Vice Chancellor, fortunately, is here. She can answer that question. With regard to the Congo, as I was indicating, we brought the Congolese together to say, let's talk about the future of the Congo. And indeed, they came and they, as I say, in all the elements that came and we discussed that, and they came to a unanimous view as to what they thought needed to be done. The issue that is being raised, like for instance about the people who committed genocide in Rwanda in 1994, and then went into the Eastern Congo, who now became what is called the FDLR. The question that is being raised is important. What are we doing about those people? In 2001, 2002, after we had concluded the negotiations among the Congolese had concluded the negotiations among themselves in what was called Sun City, it was clear to us that there was another element that needed to be addressed, which was the question of the relations particularly between Rwanda and the DRC. As a consequence of which, we convened a process between the two governments to look at the matter of the relations between the two of them, which would include this matter of the people who had fled from Rwanda into the Eastern Congo. As a consequence of which, there was an agreement signed by both presidents, Joseph Kabila and Paul Kagame. I recall that even Kofi Annan, who was Secretary General of the UN, insisted that he wanted to be one of the observers to that agreement. So that agreement is signed by President Kagame, President Joseph Kabila. Witnesses, Kofi Annan, myself. And part of that, I saw the Americans are saying that the agreement that was signed now in Washington between the two countries by the foreign ministers of the two countries is the first such agreement. That's not correct. First agreement was signed here in Pretoria, 2002, signed by the presidents. One of the clauses in that agreement, I'm sure it appears again in this agreement in the United States, was that it would be important for the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo to disarm the FDLR. If they want to stay in the Congo, to disarm them, they can stay as refugees. Otherwise, to resist, to assist in the process of their return to Rwanda as ordinary civilians, not armed groups. Attached to that was then the withdrawal of the Rwandan troops that were in the Congo because of the presence of the FDLR. I'm sure if you look at the agreement that was signed in Washington now, it will say the same thing. That agreement didn't work, collapsed. The reason it collapsed is because the government of the Congo did not have the capacity to disarm the FDLR. They could not implement the agreement. So I'm saying that agreement collapsed. I don't know how the situation has changed now, because I'm quite sure the agreement in the United States will have the same provision. It's the responsibility of the government of the Congo not to allow foreigners to form armies on the territory of the Congo. And therefore, this FDLR must be disarmed. And indeed can go back home to Rwanda, but the government of Rwanda must make sure it accepts these Rwandan citizens. Whether that will actually happen at now, I don't know. So that is how we're dealing with the matter of the FDLR. We couldn't insert them into a meeting where the Congolese are meeting, deciding the future of the Congo among themselves. They're not Congolese. These are Rwandans. And so I'm saying we're dealing with them in a different way, within the context of a bilateral agreement between the governments of the Congo and Rwanda. And fortunately, you've had a new agreement between the governments of Rwanda and the Congo. It has a provision for how to deal with the FDLR. So the matter is not being ignored, but it's being dealt with in that particular context. Whether the government of the Congo would have the capacity to disarm the FDLR now, as was written in that agreement between President Joseph Kabila and President Kagame. Whether they have that capacity now, I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, I don't know. But I think that's the only way to deal with the problem of the FDLR. It must be on the basis of a condition of a peace agreement between the two countries. And then the two countries must act together to make sure that what is in it, there's no security threat to Rwanda based on an armed group that is in the Congo, and vice versa. There must be no threat to the security of the DRC on the basis of some armed group that might be in Rwanda. I think that's the only way to deal with this issue. And fortunately, and hopefully, the agreement that's been signed in the US now would attend to that matter, hopefully, of the FDLR, the Rwandan refugees in the Congo. I'm talking about the Rwandan refugees because we've really never engaged the issue of Ugandan refugees in the Congo, because the problematic group was this FDLR. We've had a very Our relationship, I'm now talking as a liberation movement, our relationship with Iran starts after the overthrow of the Shah of Iran. The government of Iran at the time of the Shah had very good relations with the apartheid regime. When it was overthrown, that's when we started our own relations with Iran, which have continued ever since. At the time that the issue of the nuclear question as it relates to Iran, at that time that it arose very sharp and became a big issue, Security Council and all that, for some of that time, South Africa was the chair of the non-aligned movement. So we dealt with the government of Iran as the chair of the non-aligned movement. Because the positions that the non-aligned movement were taking was this, that the non-aligned movement is a very active supporter of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. And therefore, the non-aligned movement would be opposed to any proliferation of nuclear weapons if it occurred in Iran. That's the position we took. And so we had very active engagement with the government of Iran on this matter. And the government of Iran continued to insist with us that there was actual policy that Iran must not have nuclear weapons. And therefore the accusation that was being made at the time, they consistently denied it, that there were no nuclear weapons in Iran. As I say, we worked with them very closely at the time. I remember that there was a leading Iranian who became president of Iran, Mr. Rouhani. At the time that he was leading the negotiations on this issue, he came to us. We had a number of meetings with him. I'm saying later he became the president of Iran. During that time, maybe this is the first time I am saying this, during this time, we are chair of the non-aligned movement. I then talked to the British Prime Minister and said to him, "No, Prime Minister, we are regularly in contact with the Iranians on this matter. And they assured us that there are no nuclear weapons. Can you give me one or two facts which show that in fact there is work being done in Iran towards the manufacture of nuclear weapons?" Just a couple of facts, because then it would empower me as a chairperson of the non-aligned movement to confront the Iranians that you're not telling me the truth. So the British Prime Minister agreed. As a result, a delegation came from the British Intelligence Service, the MI6. They came here. So I met them. We raised the same issue with the government of Israel. And the delegation of Mossad came here, and we met them. We raised the same question with the US government, and the delegation of the CIA came, and they were met by the then Minister of Intelligence, Ronnie Kasrils. And all of them, these intelligence agencies, they made their presentations. The reason our countries are saying Iran is busy with nuclear weapons are the following. In all instances, what our response What you are actually arguing is 1 + 1 is 5. There was nothing of substance that they had. It was deductions. If this and that, therefore the other. I'm saying that's why we say 1 + 1 = 5. I'm saying that was the actuality, and at that point of time, that it seemed to us that the government of Iran was quite being very truthful when they say there's no nuclear weapons. And indeed, these intelligence agencies, where they came to see us, could not give us information of an alternative kind. I do not know whether the situation in Iran with regard to nuclear weapons has changed. I'm saying during the time we're in government, historically, that was the position. I know the government of Iran continues to insist on that issue. Whether that's changed or not, I don't know. The issues of the involvement of MTN, for instance, in Iran, was entirely a matter between the company and Iran. The Iranians put out a tender for mobile telephony. MTN won that contract. I remember there was strong opposition. Another competitor there was a Turkish company. But that was entirely a commercial thing. So I don't see the reason why the matter of the relations between South Africa and Iran should offend anybody. These are ordinary, normal, bilateral relations between South Africa and Iran. There's nothing exceptional about them. And indeed, I don't know what the chief of the National Defense Force said when he was in Tehran recently. I'm sure that would not have created new policy towards Iran. So as I say, I don't know what it is that would be offensive to anybody, as a consequence of which there would be a confrontation between us and any other country about the issue of our relations with Iran. There's nothing exceptional about those relations. The U.S. historically, as everybody, students at the school know, the U.S. has had what has been called the Monroe Doctrine for centuries, which was that part of the world is the exclusive sphere of influence by the United States, Latin America, and so on. And I'm afraid, I think that attitude persists. And so when Cuban Revolution succeeded in 1959, Fidel Castro would say, when we took power in 1959, we were pink in our politics. We were pink, like the shirt I'm wearing. I think it's pink. And he says, what turned us red was the response of the United States towards Cuba. It was the attitude that the United States government took at that time, which was to say, in our sphere of influence in terms of the Monroe Doctrine, you cannot have policies of which the United States government disapproves. And therefore took certain actions against Cuba. I think you're having a similar phenomenon with regard to Venezuela. Because I wouldn't imagine that Venezuela is a threat to the United States. I think you can't imagine that. that Venezuela becoming a threat to the U.S. such that the U.S. must destroy troops to come and attack Venezuela. Doesn't make sense to me. But I think it's probably influenced by this continuing doctrine that this part of the world is our sphere of influence, and therefore we will not allow that any government should pursue policies with which we disagree. I would hope that it's a matter that can be resolved, because the countries of Latin America, like the countries of Africa, really surely should be free to decide what their destiny is, without anybody dictating to them that you are in my sphere of influence, therefore do the following. I do not know whether, I cannot answer the question whether the U.S. knew what Israel was going to do relative to this recent attack in Doha. I don't know that. And I don't want to guess at it. But clearly, I do not think we would approve. We have a situation here where there are negotiations going on involving Hamas, the Israeli government, government of Qatar, government of Egypt, government of the United States, all of them involved. Let's find a way of solving these problems. Peace, release of hostages, release of political prisoners, and all of that. And then in the middle of those negotiations, you then take action to decapitate one of the negotiators, which was Hamas. Can't be right. You need a Hamas which has got capacity to engage its issues and come to a resolution. You don't need a decapitated Hamas. It's not going to solve the problem. So I'm just saying that this attack that took place now in Doha by Israel, I don't think it contributed anything to the resolution of the conflict that is going on there. Whether the Americans knew about that attack or not, I really don't know. As I was trying to indicate earlier, our country, the rest of our continent, and I think everybody else, has got to find a way of intervening in the process of the formation of this new world order, in good measure influenced by what the Trump administration is doing. Our government has taken a position that I think is correct, to say we don't want a war, a fight with the Americans. We want to engage them so that let us find a solution. For instance, answer the question, why these tariffs? Let's find a solution to that particular matter. I think the government has taken a position with regard to that. And I do hope the continuing engagement between our government and the United States will resolve this matter. We don't want, our government, I'm saying, has taken a correct position in saying we don't want a confrontation with the United States. But also correct for the government here to say, but we insist on our independence and our capacity as a country to determine for ourselves what is good for South Africa. It's also correct to insist on that. And hopefully the engagement, continuing engagement with the US government about the tariffs and whatever else will produce the necessary outcome. The issue of African alignment. That's an agreed position of the African continent. This issue where the African continent talks about African unity it's exactly that point. That we need to come to a stage where we have the kind of alignment that we're talking about, whether it's the laws in education, in health, or whatever. During the 50th anniversary, the year of the 50th anniversary of the independence of Ghana, which must have been 2007, something like that. There was a summit of the African Union which took place in Accra. It discussed this issue of African unity. When we say Africa must unite, practically what are the steps that must be taken? There was a long discussion about this thing among very well-attended heads of government, heads of state. And the big conflict was, how do you achieve this alignment, this unity? Is it top-down or bottom-up? This was the basic question that was discussed. And the view that won the day was bottom-up. Colonel Gaddafi was very much arguing for the top-down thing. Let's form the Union of African States today. South Africa was offered the Foreign Ministry and the Ministry of Defense of Africa. Things like that. I'm saying the view that prevailed was no, let's come at it from below. Let the regional economic communities be the building blocks towards this united Africa. So that the alignment process that our colleague was talking about there would start at that regional level. So that the regional economic communities would then begin the process of form, for instance, you see the East African community have got a parliament. In East African Parliament, ECOWAS has got the same thing. SADC, I think, we got something similar, very shaky. But the idea was that you could then do this integration that our colleague, this alignment, which our colleague was talking about, in education and health, but starting from below and building to the African continental level. And I think that remains a position. Whether that is happening or not, now, I think it relates to the question I raised earlier of the general weakening of the Pan-African drive on our continent. I think one of the examples of this weakening is, for instance, the breakaway of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso from ECOWAS. It's an indication of the weakening, I'm saying, of this. So that process of the alignment on the continent, which our colleagues was asking about, I'm saying would be impacted upon by that general weakening of that Pan-African spirit. Last year, 2024, many people asked me to say something about 30 years of democracy in South Africa. Yeah. There were many requests like this from the media, domestic, international, in various organizations. So I thought, no, I couldn't do these individual interviews. Rather, let me make one statement about this issue. South Africa in 30 years, and then answer questions after that. So I therefore addressed a public meeting and public address on the 30th of April last year about South Africa at 30. And having discussed everything about South Africa at 30, I then said, it seems to me that one of the things that needs to happen, because there are too many unanswered questions, it's not absence of knowledge of the problems. As our colleague, the president of the SRC, was saying, we know the problems of poverty and about this and that and the other. The problem, though, is that as a country, we have not been able to solve them, these problems. Never mind our election manifestos. All of us put out manifestos at election time. This is what we're going to do. None of them has assisted us to solve this problem. So I said, I think it is time that we get the people of South Africa themselves, the ordinary people, to get together and answer these questions. What do they think? Not political parties or whatever, but the people themselves. Let them meet and say, give an example. Why don't we have a national dialogue? The participants, for instance, in the national dialogue would be the women of South Africa. That's one constituency. So what you do, you ask Professor Puleng Lengabola here, who happens to be a woman, to say to Puleng, can you put together a delegation of 200 women, inclusive of the women of South Africa, who must then attend as a delegation to the national dialogue? Same with the youth, same with the traditional healers, same with many people, the arts world, the people of the faith organizations, and so on. So you have delegations of this kind, of the ordinary people. Not to complain that we are hungry. We know that. But to say, how do you solve this problem? That let the people speak. Not represented by their political parties, but the people themselves. So I said, let's have that national dialogue. I then said that same speech that this idea, this thing is, I'm saying this thing, but it's too big even for me. So I'm going to raise this same matter with the foundations and say to the foundations, this is what I think. Can you people take up this matter? So I requested a meeting with them. Lutuli Foundation, Mandela Foundation, Tutu Foundation, Biko Foundation, Sobukwe, Mbeki, all of them. And said, this is what I think, this is what I've said publicly. I think you people must take up this matter. And fortunately, they agreed. So these are the people who then set about organizing for the national dialogue. Now, I don't know if Max Bokwana is still here. Is he here? Oh, you are here. No reason I'm mentioning Max is because the foundations constituted what became called a preparatory task team to organize the national dialogue. I've never been party to that committee. Max, who is the CEO of the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, is a member of that committee. So I thought I would ask Max to come and complete an answer to this question. Which was, why did the foundations leave? And what is going to happen in the consequence of that? I think it's best that the preparatory task team answers that question. I'm not a member of the preparatory task team. Ever since the foundations agreed, Max, can you please come?
So this is Ishmael, and Ishmael has been the youth league of the preparatory task team, and then because you needed to say, possible most of our futures have already been destroyed, but we must not destroy the future of young people. It's in their interest that this must work. But let me do something so that everybody can understand very quickly. In explaining what happened, in the course after the head of state had announced the date of the 15th of August, we were taken to court by one of the leaders of the trade union movement and the political party. And the papers in the court were saying, we know all of you. There is nothing genuine about what you are doing. You want to use government and government money to prop up the misfortunes of the ANC. So there's nothing trustworthy about you. And then secondly, he says, I know how you comrades behave. You've got interesting methodologies of skimming money from government. One way of you going to skim this money, you're going to do what this union leader says, do self-created emergencies so that you can get money very quickly, but you don't have time, plan, and transparent process of how to spend that money. So you will spend that money within few days, and it gives you an opportunity to do all manner of wrong things about that money. And he says then the third thing is that we don't trust this process because this process is not citizen-led process. It's going to be a government-led process so that the government can deal with its own problems. So this accusation is put directly at us. So we responded in detail and said, no, that's not correct. This process is exactly the way the president is talking about. We're saying our country is on its knees. There seems to be very lack of clarity where will this country will be tomorrow, politically and economically. And it looks like from the political parties we do not have the answers. So our view is that the people of South Africa are sovereign. And it's these people that must give the answer about this South Africa we want and this South Africa we don't want. We explained that this has nothing to do with helping the ANC. This has nothing to do with the abuse of government. So we write an affidavit. And secondly, we say these foundations will not touch money and this preparatory task team. If there's any money for any resources that are going to be used, they will be through NEDLAC that has got that such capacity. So there's not going to be any self-created emergencies as we are being accused. And as a result, the government is just going to be one of the participants. It's not going to be the drivers of the process. We write all of these things, and the head of state does the same thing, and ourselves at the foundations, we went to court. And as we went to court, we argued that there's nothing urgent about this. These allegations are not correct. And the court agreed with us and chased away that union leader. Here is the problem. 5 days after that, we were asked by some participants in the process to behave exactly the same way we were being accused. And our position as the foundations was that we can't walk away from the oath that we have taken. We can't begin to say we will solve South Africa's problems when we act on unprincipled basis. We can't solve South Africa's problems when we cause all of this chaos. So in the end, this is the work Ishmael and the team we have been doing for 13 months. They arrived 3 weeks before the 15th of August. A group of people say, we've got authority, we are ready, we're going to drive this process. 2 minutes. Yeah. So when these new people says, no, we are ready to have a convention at UNISA in 8 days, we say, but you can't. And as we're speaking, one of them says, no, here's 28 million rand, it has just come into my phone. So we said, this is exactly what we've been accused of. We do not want to be close to a process like that. But more importantly, we had organized, we had looked at about 30 sectors. We were saying the engagement of the convention, it will be very different from a Lekgotla, it will be very different from an Imbizo, because one of the challenges this nation must face is this idea of anti-intellectual. And this acceptance that our nation must be directed largely on semi-illiterate basis. So what we thought we should do is to identify 10, 12 pain points, SRC President, and put together some detailed work around these points, whether it's the economy, whether it's state of security, whether it's foreign relations, Africa agenda. We put together all of this work. And we said, so we got some two economists that wrote a very complicated economics document. We said, no, we'll take 2 universities, University of the Western Cape and University of Johannesburg, to help us summarize these documents so that they become understandable. We had young people in the group that says, we will do fact sheets and then we will do infographics. So that you take these documents, complicated one, less complicated one, just figures, give it to the women so that they meet on their own and discuss. Give it to the youth, they do the same thing, give it to the traditional leaders, all of the 30 groups. And from each one, having discussed all of these points, they will say, no, it's not 12 problems, it's 13, 14, 15. But this is our view. Then we constitute a convention. That convention is to begin the dialogue based on this information that has been put together. So our colleagues that says, let's rush, they say, don't worry about the documents. So don't worry about all of the discussions. We will meet at UNISA, we'll find out when we get there what we talk about. And we were saying we can't get involved in a process like that because, as the SRC president was saying, this process has got lots of people that are doubting it. There's lots of cynicism about it. So the way we present it, it must be inspiring and transformative and very different from what has been happening in Izimbizos and other structures. Now, when we could not agree on the approach, we asked one of the intellectuals to sit us down and say, how do we put this process together? We sat as the preparatory task team that has got other people that are beyond the foundations. So when we agree on the best approach, we said no, it's 8 days before the 15th of August. You can't do a credible process. So let's put this thing for at least 2 months and do it in such a way that South Africans see something new, not see chaos. And we agreed to put together that proposal and send it to the head of state so that together we can postpone this and do all of the preparatory work. The day we're supposed to go to the head of state, we were then told by some of our colleagues that they don't remember what we were talking about yesterday. So this thing must proceed. It's at that point then that we had to tell the head of state, says, the whole thing is not legally credible. So we shouldn't mislead the nation. The preparations are hopelessly underwhelming. We're not going to be able to produce the necessary agenda. We're not showing the necessary seriousness in this process. And at that point we say, but those that say they are ready, they can go ahead. But as the foundation, we've got a responsibility to protect the credibility and the legitimacy of this process. Why? Because it is just too important. It may be the only thing that saves this country from abyss. So we cannot allow it to be done in any other way by people sometimes where you think their objective is actually to collapse it. So whatever happened at UNISA happened, and we do not want to be harping on that. What we are saying, we're meeting the eminent persons group that had been put together by the head of state and say to them, let's put our heads together. How then do we start building confidence again in this process? It's a very heavy job, Professor Antony, because you are dealing with a process that was facing cynicism already. We have seemed to have plunged it in another difficulty. But this is one thing we're not going to give in. We are working to develop that confidence-building process. There's quite a lot of work that Ishmael and the team are working on. But in the end, we will have to regroup the way we had designed. We are not prepared to allow this process to fail. So we will actually look for support from the people that are in the room. But I'm quite happy to engage in this process beyond this. This was for the students, not for us. But thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Mr. President, I just want to thank you for making the call for a national dialogue. Who would have thought that the F.W. de Klerk Foundation, the Thabo Mbeki Foundation, the Tutu Foundation, and many others, the Steve Biko Foundation, would be standing united in resolve? Because as Max said, this process is too important to fail. The youth of South Africa deserve a national dialogue whereby they have the chance to co-create solutions by their own African hands for the future. And I want to be a bit bolder than you, Max. Let us make no mistake about it. The national dialogue has been hijacked. Let me be clear. It's been hijacked. And it is our duty now as the citizens of South Africa to reclaim this national dialogue by whatever means necessary. We must also be wary of the fact that there are, as Max said, those who want to collapse the national dialogue. And we will not give them the opportunity to do that. This is why we are now engaging with the eminent persons. But thank you so much, Mr. President.
Thanks, colleagues. So that's the answer to the question that was posed. There was another question that was posed, which was about what the university is doing with regard to people with disability. Can I ask Vice Chancellor to answer that question? Please.
Thank you very much, His Excellency President Mbeki. Let me reaffirm and reassure University of South Africa's commitment to universal access for persons with disabilities. At the university, we recruit and invite people living with disabilities in the 400 qualifications that UNISA offers. And we have an advocacy resources center that helps the students and staff with disabilities. Beyond this, we have 23 multi-purposes ICT laboratories that we share with other universities in the different provinces that our students, staff, and others can optimize for their learning processes. And therefore, we believe that to strengthen our universal access for persons with disabilities, it will also be prudent for us to developing some of the work that is required. So if you look behind, there's a lift that is geared to assist persons with disabilities. You'll realize in almost all our events, whether technologically or digitally, there's translation into the 12th language. And I think this is a commitment that we are not going to relent on, because it's part of not just our commitment as a university in reclaiming Africa's futures, but it is what is central and essential for a socially just institution and country. So thank you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. The organizing team and the program director are telling me that we're going to have the last 4 questions for the president. There is no time. Time is the enemy. I know every time we meet like this, people leave not happy because they wanted to ask questions. That's number 1. I want a lady. That's number 2. That's number 3. That's number 4. You see, the first round, we had 6 males. So we're trying to redress that. Okay, number 1.
Thank you so much, Chair. May I continue? Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Chair. And respectfully, the hands were up, the female hands were up in round 1, but they were unseen. I guess an African proverb. Mongameli, ndicela ubuza tata. We have an understanding that the creative sector has played an incredible role in messaging the importance and the principles of the struggle movement. Safika ku 94. I need to understand, sir, from your point of view, what were the errors that made it such that creative practitioners in this country are subjected to the most harrowing forms of vulnerability, and this regression continuing in the form of people dying in the most undignified ways. And second to that, we find that our creative ecosystem has been reduced to glorified decorative pieces taken out as and when people need. And second to that, our creative ecosystem is now it's in a precarious position where the private sector is now monopolizing it and plundering it, as opposed to it being positioned for national and continental unity. Because what gatherings like this do, music does all the time in messaging principles, in uniting people. And we find that now Africa in particular is a plundering site for creativity, and our artists are being exploited, but they could never say that because the chains are no longer in iron, but they're in 24-karat gold. So we want to understand from your positionality from 1994 and your administration, what were the errors that the state could not protect practitioners as ordinary workers, having dignified human rights and for them to have economic dignity as well as being positioned
That's a very
as
critical
pillars,
question.
as pillars
That's a
of
very
national
critical
and
question.
continental,
Let's have a second one. Where's number 2?
Greeting, Mr. President and others. Mr. President, I'm a student pursuing my master's degree in the University of South Africa in Learning Education. I'm also an educator. My question is, as educators on the ground, we face many challenges in our schools: overcrowded classrooms, limited resources, language barriers, and a constant struggle to balance discipline with inclusivity. Now, with the introduction of the Better Bill, there is much debate about how it will reshape education, especially around issues like policy, school government, and the admission of unregulated learners. Some see it as a progressive step towards equity, while others fear it will undermine community and parental involvement. Given your long-standing commitment to building a just and inclusive society, what are your views on the Better Bill? And do you believe it is truly addressing the core problems that educators and learners are experiencing daily?
Thank you. Number 3.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, Mr. President. My name is Tsepo Mojapelo. Mine is very short. In the interest of time, I had quite a few questions, but I will keep it just to one. Mr. Bohwana, I hope I'm pronounced Bohwana. Thank you. My question, let me start with my question, then put the context. The question is, what is the Thabo Mbeki School doing practically to assist with this outrolling of Pan-Africanism or whatever education that there is? And I say that because in this room, I'm an attorney, there are civil servants here, there are business people, people watching or people that will be watching this are also coming from private sector, wherever. What is it that we can do to assist with practically implementing whatever programs? Now, Mr. Max did say that there are 30 pillars, and perhaps what I expected was maybe an explanation or just the list of these are the 30 programs that we have, and a call for us to come through. Because like Mr. President said very perfectly, is that the African solutions will come from us, the African people. And we are here, we are available, but we don't know what to do. We don't know what the agenda is. And thank you, Mr. President, for setting that agenda. We just now need the agenda points so that we can be in contact with the school to say that this is how we can assist, or this is what we are willing, or this is what we are already doing, and we require X and Y assistance. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Let's get the last one. Let's get the last one. It was at the back. Yes, there. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, this is the last round in the interest of time.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lindo Tsibani. Greetings, Mr. President. Thank you for the privilege to draw from the wells of wisdom. Mine is more on I want to bring it to a personal level or to home, bring it home. Maybe just in context, maybe one of the contributing factors in the shift in the Pan-African focus is because we have been plagued by domestic issues. So it's very difficult to focus outside when your home is burning. And also, I just wanted to just pose a challenge to the foundations, and now that Mr. Bohwana has indicated what the whole arrangement was with regards to the national dialogue.
The issue is that as African people, when we receive democracy, we're starting from a negative balance. So there's more to cover. During President Begi's administration, one of the things that we have learned, he was putting a culture of self-sufficiency as Africans, that we are capable. Unfortunately, after his administration, we suffered as a country. So we are not back to square one in terms of our mind transformation. So is it possible for our foundations and for our leaders to consider a new approach in terms of transforming the mind, rather than we keep pouring these opportunities? It's like we are pouring new wine into old wineskins, but the minds of the people are damaged. Is it not a time for us to look at other options in terms of the programs that we provide, either at the TM school or wherever we are given opportunity to educate the African child, that we should focus on transforming the mind more than giving people academics, but we need to transform the mind, that we create wealth and be able to retain it.
Thank you so much. Mr. President, that was the last question of the session. Over to you.
You know, when the late Victor Ntoni died, the jazz fanatics here will remember Victor. There was a memorial service in Johannesburg. And one of the speakers there was a jazz singer, also very important, Sylvia Mtunyelwa from Cape Town. And so during her speech, she says that when she got the news that Victor had passed away, she phoned the Department of Arts and Culture, National, to tell them that she had just received the news that Victor Ntoni had passed away, so that they could then discuss with her what to do about the funeral. So she says she put this matter, this is what has happened, talking to some official, the Department of Arts and Culture. And after she had explained, the official says to her, "You said Victor who?" Senior official at Arts and Culture did know that Victor Ntoni. That tells you something about the issues that you are raising. That for many, many years, I think at the government level, we have not quite known what we do with regard to the Department of Arts and Culture. And that's why you would find a senior official not knowing who Victor Ntoni was. It's a much deeper problem. So rather than go into that history, I'm glad you raised the question, because in the context of discussing the national dialogue, this is one of the questions that arose. That here is an opportunity to get people, the people in the creative world, to address the nation on the challenges. You know, Ringo Madlingo says to me that part of the problems that he was facing is that the recording companies are insisting that each time you compose a song, it must be about love. Can't be about anything else. And Victor says, but music Music is critically important in the process of nation building and so on. But I want to write about that. But the record company said, no, write about love. And he says, never, you see those divorces that are taking place, but write about love. I'm saying that it's a very interesting and important sector because in the preparations for the national dialogue, we've agreed that the creative world must be properly be represented here. There's a particular challenge that arises because these are musicians, dancers, poets, theater people, painters, sculptors. It's all the world of the creative arts. Do you form one delegation? Can you? Or different delegations, but it's critically important that that sector must be represented to address exactly the questions that you are raising. Because the answers have not come for the last 30 years from the government side. But I think with an input like that from the creative artists themselves about what is to be done, perhaps the country will be on the way to addressing the challenges that you are addressing. There is work that is going on. I know the artists are meeting in order to say that how do we get ourselves together and what are the issues that need to be addressed? What is it that we agree upon? So the matter is on the agenda. I'm not very familiar with the Bella Act, except watching the media. They complained about 2 paragraphs in the Bella Act. So I then looked at it. One of them, it says, as I recall it, you might correct me, the school governing bodies will have a right to decide on language of instruction for the school, subject to approval by the government, the provincial authority. So what will be decided is, in fact, a recommendation. That with regard to appointment of staff, same. The school governing body has got authority, subject to approval by the government authorities. These are the 2 of the changes. When I've asked, why do we need these changes? The answer I've received has been, I'm not claiming that this is a comprehensive review, but a part of the answer I've received is the population settlements are changing. So the people move. Instead of staying in this area, they move to another and so on. As a result of which, the issue of medium of instruction in a particular school changes because the population in the area of capture of the school changes. And therefore, that's why you need a body beyond the school governing body, which has oversight over what is happening in the area, which is able to intervene. To say, with regard to language, you've got to change language because this area has now acquired a different set of people. That's the argument I've received. Now, I haven't said this publicly. I'm saying it now for the first time. You know, I now put on my ANC cap. And I say to myself, you know, this is a law of general application. Now take Naledi Township in Soweto. Let us say, I'm not saying that's the case, but let us assume that the school governing body in Naledi says the school or schools here or this particular school, medium of instruction will be Setswana, because the population largely is Tswana speaking. The law then says, subject to approval by the educational authorities. Now, the educational authorities might very well say, agreed, add Xhosa also. Because there's been some population movement, there's some Xhosa-speaking people in Naledi, close to the school. That is what I think the law provides for. I'm saying now, putting on my ANC cap, I say to myself, it's an article of faith. The people shall govern. As Max was saying just now, the people are sovereign. It doesn't sit comfortably with me that the school governing body in Naledi, the people, take a decision, medium of instruction is Setswana, and a bureaucrat intervene to countermand them. Doesn't sound right. If we say we authorize the people to decide what should be the medium of instruction in the school, let it be the people who decide. Not a Thabo Mbeki who sits in some bureaucratic office, who countermands the masses of the people. Can't be right. If there are problems of population movement, as a result, then you have challenges. That you now actually have 10% of the people of population of Naledi is Xhosa speaking. Find a way of dealing with that. You can't do it by countermanding the voice of the people, by getting officials to countermand the voice of the people. So, and that would relate also to the appointment of officials. So to the extent that the Bila Act puts as supreme government bureaucrats to decide language policy for schools, I don't think that can be correct. How you solve the problem, I don't know. I think you could actually put it in the law to say that in instances where the wrong things of this thing happen, they would be illegal. Then that's a matter, you then also have the intervention of the courts to decide the matter. Not a bureaucrat sitting in some office. So I think that's what part of my problem. As the matter was explained, laws of general application, and sometimes people say, no, we're dealing with these Afrikaners who are resisting integration of their schools. I'm saying, but it's the laws of general application. This matter will apply to the families in Naledi, in the same way that it will apply to families in Waterkloof in Pretoria. How we solve the problem is not this way. That's all I think. I don't know what else there is in the Bila Act. I looked only at these provisions because it seemed to me that was what was being complained about. With the last matter, which was raised about what is the school doing about specific programs to reinforce this Pan-African spirit and all that and so on. Rather than ask Professor Paswana to come back to speak about that, I think Professor Paswana, maybe we need a communication policy to be able to answer that question, which was posed, not tonight, but in our communication about what is the school offering and how is it answering the question that she was posing. what is it that you do that empowers us as citizens to contribute to this Pan-African perspective? I think it should be part of the communication system of the school, so that the public understands better what it is specifically that the school offers in the context of the question that was being posed. Everybody looks very hungry. It's almost 5 to 6. Thanks for coming and thanks for the patience. We'll meet again. Thanks.